Hello and welcome to this week's Football Digest. Today, I'm joined by Matt Dunn, football writer for the Daily Express, and Neil McLeman, the sports writer for the Daily Mirror. I'm Andy Dunn, chief sports writer for the Daily Mirror. And as usual, plenty on the agenda this week, starting with all things Manchester United after their painful exit from the Champions League. We'll also be discussing the World Cup qualifying draw as England meets some familiar foes. The scenes in Paris, remarkable scenes as PSG and Istanbul walked off the pitch. Chris Wilder's struggles at Sheffield United continue. We'll be looking at that. And there's the return of fans and the Premier League title race. Can Jose and Frank maintain the challenge? Can Saints stay up there? And what's going on in Spain? And we'll also be asking for your player of 2020. First, though, where else to start, as so often, than at Old Trafford? Just another quiet week, really. Comeback win at West Ham. I was there for that one. Mina Raiola shoots his mouth off as usual. Pogba keeps his shut. United blow their Champions League campaign with that defeat at RB Leipzig. De Gea gets a coating from some critics. Their ex-players close ranks around the manager. All standard stuff, really, for a few days at Manchester United. You know, John Cross is normally here, and he's on holiday this week, but one of the bees in his bonnet, Matt, is how he perceives it as pundits, ex-Manchester United players, close ranks around Ole Gunnar Solskjaer after whatever setback has befallen Manchester United. Do you think this is the case this week? Is Solskjaer getting the attention and the criticism he deserves after that defeat in Leipzig?
Well, he's not getting it from those particular characters anyway. He's getting it from all other quarters. I think what's missing from Manchester United at the moment is clear leadership at all levels, but particularly from the manager. I was thinking about what it is about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, that he can get these results. He sort of cheerily goes about his way, pulls a few master strokes, gets a great result in Paris, but then can sort of stink the place out in other performances. And constantly have this ruck with Pogba. And it's leadership. He doesn't strike me as a man who you'd want to go and play for necessarily. On our level, he wouldn't want me necessarily, although the old left foot's still available should he need it. But we all meet managers and we spend time with managers. And as a general rule, they're quite impressive characters, I've always found, certainly the good ones. And you kind of spend time in their company and you think, no, I get why dressing rooms want to play for you, because it is difficult being a leader of men. It is a particular quality. And that's what I thought is the vacuum, actually. I don't know if Solskjaer, he's a nice bloke, he's a smashing fella, and he's obviously got a load of mates in that dressing room of his when he used to play, because they are sticking up for him. But I'm not sure he's a leader. I mean, people talk about all the media love for Pochettino. The reason for that, I think, a lot of, is because people are quite inspired by him. People around him, he has this aura about him that actually you do feel like you want to do a bit better for him, or you know, be on his side, basically. And I just don't get any of that in my limited dealings with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Nice bloke though he is.
You see, the thing I would say about that, Matt, is that surely we hear a lot about this leadership, but leadership comes in all guises, surely, doesn't it? I mean, without a doubt, you know, I've told this story before when we had a social event towards the end of last year, and I sat with Jurgen Klopp. You know, by the end of the second course, you know, I would have run through brick walls for Jurgen Klopp. He was that inspirational. You know, you could understand fully why players would buy into him. Having said that, though, Matt, what I'm trying to say is it comes in different guys. Having said that, look at say Bob Paisley. You know, I mean, no manager has a record like Bob Paisley's. Yet, you know, he sat in the stands for half the time. You know, you wouldn't have got Bob Paisley out on the pitch, beating his chest and punching to the cop. You know, it was a quiet handshake and off he goes, a quietly spoken guy. So surely it comes in all
he oozed authority, didn't he, Bob? I mean, I never met the man, but from what I gather, you know, if he had a quiet word and said that's what you need to do, people listened to him because he had that authority. I don't think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's got that authority. There's other people. George Graham, I've always been impressed with in dealings with him, and he's never so quietly spoken sometimes, but he just says a little quiet word, and you think, actually, I'm listening to this more than thinking about it more than I probably should be. And there's certain characters who have that quality about them. And I don't think Solskjaer's one of them.
Neil, I would just say, I guess, those managers of yesteryear that we're talking about, a George Graham or even a Bob Paisley, I guess they didn't have to deal with characters such as Mino Raiola talking about their, and superstar agents talking about their clients. How helpful or unhelpful do you think that the Raiola's latest intervention has been?
Yeah, I just think it's come to the point now where Mino Raiola just wants to get Pogba out. And I think that the timing of that latest the interview in Tuttosport the other day was, obviously totally unhelpful. And I think it's just an issue that should have been addressed before. Pogba is a World Cup winner, and that his displays with France bear no resemblance to what he does with Manchester United. And, this is an issue that should have been addressed along with, the Jordan Sancho, all the other things. There are obvious issues, as Matt said, from the top to the bottom of the club. And the only issue clearly isn't with Solskjaer. What struck me over the last week or two is the acceptance that Manchester United from fans and ex-players of the slipping in the standards. It's almost like they've become the new Arsenal, in the sense that Manchester United used to be competing for the league title in the Europe Champions League every year, and now the sort of top four and a cup is going to be okay. Lots of great coverage this morning that the United We Stand fans in Jamie Reedman in the Mirror today saying, "Oh, but we've got a nice team that play football. They obviously like Solskjaer." And a lot of the fans seem to be happy with that. I understand it's divided, but it was the same with Arsenal. They went from being title challengers to just trying to qualify for the Champions League and winning cups. And once you slip down there, and look where Arsenal are now.
I just want to quickly address a couple of questions that have just come through. One from Eddie. Who's suggesting actually that Solskjaer might have picked the wrong lineup against RB Leipzig. I don't know what you think of. Obviously, he went without Pogba, without Van der Beek. Do you actually think tactically he got that one right, Matt? Clearly he didn't, because they got beat.
No, I was going to say.
But tactically, do you think that was a glaring error?
It's hard to say a glaring error, because I always feel. These guys live the tactics. They've got teams that live the tactics. There's always a reason for it. And hindsight's a wonderful thing to criticise people with. He clearly has a plan. And tactically, I don't think he's not someone who pulls off masterstrokes necessarily. Although that said, getting a result in Paris, again, coming back to that, you need to set up in a certain way. And he did found that way. But I don't think that's where the issue is for him. It's easy to criticise tactics after individual games, but whatever tactics you play, if the players aren't playing for you and going the extra mile because they're not inspired by you, then you're not going to get the result that you expect.
Another question from William, which is an interesting question, actually, in the subtext of it. He says, well, what will be the next stop for Solskjaer? And I guess that goes a little bit back to what you're saying, Matt, is that if someone gets sacked from Man United, you normally think, where will they go? Where will, Jose Mourinho was never going to go away, was he? I guess Solskjaer is the type, they've got a manager who isn't of that ilk, is he? He's not part of the coaching Galacticos. And we're not going to say, okay, if they get rid of Solskjaer, he's going to reappear at Real Madrid in a year's time.
But having said that, you don't forget the chairman who wants to appoint a former Manchester United manager. There's always ambitious chairmen at clubs that want that sort of CV on their desk. So he'll appear somewhere and have to do what perhaps someone like David Moyes has done, which is rebuild his reputation via a number of clubs, if he really is as good enough to have been given that Manchester United job in the first place.
Neil, I want to move on to the Manchester derby this Saturday. Clearly, you can solve cure a lot of ills with a win there for United. They're only 5 points off the top, aren't they, with a game in hand? City are up there as well. I just quickly, we'll come on to City in a moment, but just to finish off on United, I think there are a couple of issues. I think Solskjaer's staying in the job. So I think, in a way, debates about his future are interesting, but I think that Ed Woodward is very, very set in keeping faith with Solskjaer, unless everything went really disastrous. And then in the semi-final of the League Cup, and they're high up in the league. So he's got a decision to make, Solskjaer, in the meantime. Does he bring Pogba into the starting lineup, considering they were probably better with him in it at West Ham and better in it for the half hour he was there on Tuesday night? Does he bring Pogba back and maybe swallow a bit of pride? And David De Gea came in for some really, really fierce criticism from Paul Scholes in particular. Does he stick with David De Gea, and does he bring Paul Pogba back? They're my selection questions for this Saturday. Neil?
Yeah, I would play him. just because he, as we saw at the West Ham and saw at Leipzig the other day, he gives you something extra. So, but as we mentioned earlier, it's a really difficult position to be in. But I think that Pogba gives something to that United midfield. Going forward, I mean, they've got a lot going on. That it's just going back to what we were saying earlier. There are a lot of good players there at Manchester United, and often going forward, and their away record is superb. They do a lot of things right. There's just small margins that aren't getting right. Whether you're seeing it's the preparation or certainly the going out on the pitch and always conceding the first goal. There are things that are going wrong that shouldn't be going wrong at a top club. And no, I agree. I think they'll give him more time. I think Pochettino's the man in waiting, if you like. That everyone assumes that he's going to take over. It would be very interesting if Zidane had lost last night and Real Madrid were going to move to Pochettino, and it may well put Manchester United to forcing them into a decision. But no, I think you play Pogba, you play your best team.
Yeah, no, I want to, Matt, maybe you on this. I have a view. I think that it is time for Solskjaer to make a very, very big decision on the goalkeeping front. Do you think there's a decision to be made there, or do you just stick with David De Gea and ignore Dean Henderson, who thinks he should be the number one there? We know that, having talked with him in an England context.
I was at Southampton when I thought the decision had been made for him because De Gea looked in a bad way when he got injured there. But it was incredible when he came on in those the last days of the empty stadium. You could hear how loud Henderson is, how confident he is, how determined he is to lay down a marker. And in that game, they were so much better in the second half. Defensively, they didn't have much defending to do, but more organised. And that's got to have something to do with having a big fella behind them, telling them all what to do. And that, I think, is key. And I think Maguire responds well to that. And anyone around him responds well to that. Henderson's not frightened of taking on that shirt, and we know that from talking to him. But he's also, whenever he's got the brief times he's got to wear it, he's shown that he can do it. And I just think you need a stronger character behind that particular defence, because there is flakiness in it, and it just needs someone to keep them on their toes, keep them all concentrating and working as a unit. And I don't think De Gea puts that out for him. He's busy being a great goalkeeper, but I don't think he's a great marshaller of his defence necessarily.
Yeah, I think he's going through not a great time. I think it's a good point you make. The way that Maguire looked at David De Gea after that goal from Justin Kluivert the other day sort of summed everything up. They seem to enjoy playing with Henderson. It's tough. It'll be tough on De Gea. But, if Solskjaer wants to show basically that he's got the spine for this job, it's the type of decision I think he's got to make. Quickly on to Manchester City. I was there last night at the Etihad, and you think to yourself, you know what? They've won this group, obviously already before last night's game against Marseille. Maybe they'll play the reserves, and they sort of did, but they haven't got any reserves, have they? It was a remarkable side that he put out. They won 3-0. Aguero came back on. He's got pretty much now, as far as I can see, this off the top of my head, pretty much a fully fit squad to choose from. Pep Guardiola, Fernandinho was playing last night. Aguero now has come back. By the way, he didn't look fully fit, anything but. So he'll probably be on the bench. So where do you see City at the moment? Maybe, reports of their demise are exaggerated, Matt?
I mean, yeah, demise is far too strong a word for it. The only thing is whether they've taken on too much damage already to mount a Premier League challenge again. And, I don't think Liverpool are going to be rolling out results like they have done the last two seasons. But, there is quite a lot of gap there already. It just seems, in points, it's probably not as big as it just seems. But that Manchester City invincibility has been shredded by it too often this season, I think. And teams go out there thinking they've perhaps got a bit more of a chance than they would have done, the last two seasons. So, they've lost that aura's taken a denting, perhaps. And actually, the practicality is they've still got a lot of the same players, and they've still got plenty of weapons to hurt teams with. But perhaps they're not quite that little something extra has perhaps gone missing.
Neil, if I could, I was going to bring this in later, but I think while we're on the subject now, we'll bring this in. We're talking about Man City there, and Matt mentioned Liverpool. I don't think Liverpool will be slipping up, dramatically at the higher end of the league. I'm interested now. I mean, you guys see more than I do of them. Can Spurs and Chelsea stay in the mix. It looks great now. I mean, I was talking to a pal of mine the other day, just saying, won't it be absolutely fantastic if we can have a 3-horse race, a 4-horse race, a 5-horse race even. And looking at Spurs and Chelsea, I haven't seen a massive amount of them live, but it looks to me like they could maintain that challenge. Is that what do you get the impression, Neil, that Jose and Frank are there for the duration this season?
Yeah, I think they will. I still think if you had to ask me who's going to finish top 2 this season, I'd still say Liverpool and Manchester City. But I still think that it's been really good for the Premier League that the way Chelsea obviously lavished a lot of money and they've bought so many players that even they've had the chance to bring them in. Even not all of them have worked. They've still got a new players, and it's obviously worked with getting Giroud and bringing him to take his opportunities. I think Chelsea are just a really fascinating story. What they're going to be doing the rest of the season, and Spurs with Mourinho. I mean, it's just been great. And we mentioned Pochettino earlier on, and I think it's really interesting what Jose's doing at Spurs now. How it affects Pochettino's legacy at Tottenham, because especially if Jose wins things this season and goes close, what does it say about what Pochettino had with the same players? But I just think, and I think, full admiration to Mourinho that he went to Spurs, and it could have gone either way like a year ago, and it was a team that was starting to dip, and he's really shown that there's more than one way to win a football match, and it's still true that the Klopp and the Guardiola and the Nagelsmann style, that the way that Mourinho does it it's really interesting to make the way to look at football like that. And I think they bought really sensibly in the summer, guys with experience of the Premier League, and it's actually they haven't needed Bale to get this far. So the other reason as well, but they're spending 250, 300 grand on a week on a player that, with the way Kane and Son are playing, they don't actually need him.
It was funny. I was covering the Chelsea Spurs game at Stamford Bridge, and as you guys know, it's not a biggie press box, the Chelsea one. So they put you down in the stand. You're very close to the sort of cinder track at the side of the pitch. And Gareth Bale was warming up like for nearly all of the second half of that 0-0 draw, along with Ben Davies, his compatriot and fellow Welshman. And it was funny because with 10 minutes to go, Jose sort of calls them over, and you think to yourself, right, 10 minutes to go, it's 0-0. Is he going to put Gareth Bale on, the guy who we know has a game-changing moment in his world-class boots, or is he going to bring the fullback on? Well, I mean, obviously, there's no prize for guessing. On came Ben Davies, and Gareth Bale didn't get a kick again. But he's getting away with, I thought Jose, he's being indulged in a way. There's no questions being asked about Gareth Bale. If Gareth Bale wasn't playing for Real Madrid like this, we'd all be saying, what the hell's going on with Gareth Bale not getting a game for Real Madrid? He's not getting a game for Spurs. But that's because Jose's found this way, I guess. And Matt, he's found a way that is right up his street. They're not conceding goals. I mean, almost if you could have almost written the script for that Arsenal game. And to score that second goal as they did, for example, when Arsenal are in their box. I mean, these are the things. Josie must be having enjoyable sleepless nights thinking about 30 possession and we've won, 30 possession and we haven't lost to Chelsea, 30% possession and we've beaten Man City. This is peak Josie, isn't it? He's back to his very best, isn't he?
He's absolutely loving it.
I'm loving it, yes.
He's got his mojo back. He's refusing to say what Harry Kane's injury is the other week just because he didn't have to say.
Just because he didn't have an injury, I think.
Well, who knows? Yeah, but that little bit of devilment, that mischievousness, that I'm in control, I don't have to tell you guys anything, but in a kind of a playful way rather than a sinister way. He's right on top of his game at the moment. It was amazing that Arsenal, like you mentioned, that second goal. Arsenal are battering them in terms of possession and territory, and then all of a sudden you look up. Poor Thomas Partey's injured, so that kind of affected it a little bit. But suddenly you look up, and there are 4 Spurs attackers bearing down on 2 Arsenal defenders, and you think, how did this happen?
Yes.
And it happened because that's how Jose designs it to happen. Yeah. He sits there, hoodwinks teams into thinking they can come at you, and then bang, hits you on the counter. 1-0, 2-0, the game's over, and then they're now more resilient defending. than they have been for a long time. And part of the key to that is because there aren't any weak areas, because like you said, with the summer signings, he's now got 2 good, strong players in every position. So, how they'll do without Kane and Son is anyone's guess, because that just transcends everything. But that aside, they can muddle through. And that's what Pochettino's side ultimately lacks the ability to do. When Kane was injured, he lost the goals. And for as much as it's hardly to Darius to do with Mourinho, they're not rattling in a lot of goals, despite the fact that they're not seeing the ball very much.
Yes, interesting. And Neil Lampard, has a squad. Again, it struck me when I was at a Chelsea Spurs game. I looked at their bench and I saw who was on it, the likes of Havertz, and I saw who wasn't on it, the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi. And I thought he has got a really deep squad, hasn't he? That squad should be one that can challenge right till the end of the season on a few fronts.
Well, that's right. I mean, they've had the advantage. Kai Havertz, he's had the illness, etc. as well. But you spend £70 million on a player. Really, he scored a hat-trick in the Carling Cup, or whatever. But we haven't really noticed. He hasn't really made that big an impact. It doesn't really matter because they've got so many other players who have, and I think during the course of the season, so Champions League and the cup competitions, I think really Chelsea are going to be serious contenders. And I think Lampard, the way he handled it and handled expectation, and I think he's been very impressive.
Let's just wrap up the whole Premier League while we're at it, and looking ahead to this weekend. Good win for Southampton the other night, albeit in slightly controversial circumstances. Can they stay up there? And also, while we're at it, down at the bottom, Sheffield United. Do we see a way out of this for Chris Wilder? The Saints first, Neil. How about Southampton, and what do you make of the job that Ralph's doing there?
Well, I mean, Southampton are actually terrific to watch because they play this high pressing style, and it's quite high risk, and they'll often push the centre backs, having 2-on-2 and bomb the full backs forward. And they can get hurt. And we saw the Leicester game last season, and I saw them home to Spurs earlier this season, where Kane and Son worked them out and just sprang the press every time, and they scored 5 goals. And United, again, the top teams, is still a little bit way to go, but they've got this style of playing, and they've got Ings, who is, he can come back from injury, he scores again. We've got a striker that's that red hot. Does a lot of things. So I really do think that they can be the top. We're talking 7-8, that sort of fringe of the Europa League now. And it's like a little bit like Leeds in the sense that you never know what you see them, but it's going to be entertaining. You're going to see goals.
Yeah. Matt, as I say, I mean, obviously teams down at the bottom. It's a bit early yet to start panicking. I think personally, I mean, probably teams do panic at this stage, but I don't think they should. But Chris Wilder under some pressure at Sheffield United.
Pressure, hopefully not. Yeah, pressure to get points rather than pressure for his job, one would hope. But that's the trouble with momentum, belief in football, is what it gets battered during a season. Even last season, they did lose a lot of games when they've been used to winning them in the Championship. And that belief that can bring clubs up into the top flight and see them run away at the start of a season, like, for instance, teams like Blackpool did, however many years ago that was. Teams do come flying up from the Championship, come out of the blocks quickly, and then gradually it chips away. And I think it's easy to underestimate how much damage that run-in can be having. And when you arrive again at the start of the season, you're not the new boys anymore. You haven't got that going for you. No one's talking about you particularly because there's other new boys to talk about. It's not great whenever you get a point. It's suddenly it's 2 points dropped, and the whole mood changes. And Chris Wilder's achievement in doing what he did last year with Sheffield United was remarkable. And the reason it was remarkable is because he did very well with a limited bunch of players. Yeah. And they're not particularly that much better this year. It's just that magical ingredient has gone, and actually you're faced with the reality, the same reality, unfortunately, that Fulham to a large extent have, which is that their squad actually isn't good enough for the Premier League.
Yeah, I agree. I hope he's not under pressure. I think you've lost an inspirational goalkeeper for a start off. I'm not saying that the current goalkeeper has been responsible for any of the defeats, but I just think it all adds up. Sorry, Neil, you were saying about Chris Wilder?
No, just going to on Sheffield United. I mean, at the beginning of each season, we're always asked to name our predictions for who's going to win the Champions League and who's going to go down. And usually the basis that you go, the three promoted teams will struggle, and I think that's more or less usually the case. But there's often one team that sort of struggles that you don't see, and Sheffield United have been that case, and it's actually maybe not as good. It's the worst start in Premier League history they've made, and it really is quite extraordinary bad. And you just think that, well, in a way that they're going to do what Norwich. Norwich, look, they stuck with Parc through thick and thin last season and kept playing. It's a slightly different model, etc. But they're now back at the top of the Championship and coming back. So maybe that's the decision Sheffield United are going to have to make over the next couple of months, because if it carries on like this.
Yeah, again, I think that's a great point, Neil. Norwich made that decision with Daniel Farke, and now after last night's results, they are top of the Championship. And don't forget, in a very similar vein, Burnley made the same decision when they were relegated, and Sean Dyche was kept in the hot seat, and they came straight back up quite comfortably. So I would hope that even if it gets to that stage, that's what they'll do with Chris Wilder, assuming he wants to stay in that. Let's stay with the Premier League, because mirror.co.uk and all our local, regional and national digital colleagues have come together to run a Fans Footballer of the Year for 2020. It's that awards time of year, of course. It's a public vote online, and the result will be revealed on December the 21st. Now, the shortlist, and we might think there's one or two maybe absentees from this, but let's go with this, that the shortlisted 7 are Kevin De Bruyne, Virgil van Dijk, Jordan Henderson, Jack Grealish, Marcus Rashford, Sadio Mane, and Mohamed Salah. So I'll just ask you briefly, chaps, your thoughts. Who is your player, just based purely on what he has produced on the field of play this calendar year 2020? Your best player. I'll tell you what, I'll start. And I have to say, I would have to say that the player I've enjoyed watching most is Kevin De Bruyne. I mean, he doesn't have the medals to show that others do, but I would the guy I would pay to watch money out of those 7, pay the most money. I'll pay to watch them all, but the guy I pay most to watch is Kevin De Bruyne. Matt,
I've just gutted for Jack Grealish that he didn't get your vote. He must have, if he watches this program ever, then he must be gutted. He must have been a shoo-in, I'd have thought.
I've never forgiven him for his COVID stuff. No, I'm only kidding. I don't think for the first half of the year. I'm going on the whole year.
To be honest, if on the whole year, it's difficult because we talked about omissions. I don't think Harry Kane's had a bad 12 months. Well, 9 months.
He was injured for quite a bit of it, wasn't he?
Yeah. So everyone else sat out for a bit. We didn't play football for quite a bit. So, we've got chunks out of the year anyway. It is a weird season. I feel a little bit sorry for Mirror voters that we're having the same asterisk, Mirror readers that we're having the same asterisk on Marcus Rashford. Because if anyone's had an exceptional season, and he's not done too badly on the pitch, against the backdrop of that, I don't mind him getting as many accolades and whatever that comes his way. And I think the BBC situation is a bit of a farce, to be honest. And I'm pleased to at least see him on the shortlist so Mirror readers can make up their own mind. But I'm with you. The best player in the Premier League as a footballer, and has been for 3 or 4 years, is Kevin De Bruyne. The man I picked out as the young player to watch with Chelsea in the year that Mourinho played him once and then sold him on. But that was based on a pre-season out in the Far East when he was incredible. And I've always wondered what went wrong there, and it's about the only time I've ever got anything vaguely right on football, and Mourinho didn't. But yeah, no, he's always been. He's an incredible player.
Neil, who would you pick out amongst those 7? From those 7?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with Matt on Marcus Rashford that he's the outstanding personality player in the Premier League here for what he's done off the pitch. Personally, I'd vote for Mo Salah just because what he brings. What Liverpool have achieved this year and the way they did it, certainly before the pandemic, the way they played, and I think he's still part of it. And I just think he's a superb player. I love watching him.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting. Is there anyone so far? Okay, we've only had 10 games. Is there anyone so far who has emerged this season? I'm trying to think who will go into the voting. When it comes around again at the end of the season. I'm just trying to think. It is, in general, it has to be the sort of usual suspects, doesn't it, from each club really, who are stepping up to the plate. Harry Kane in particular, you touched on Harry Kane there, Matt. And, a lot's been said about him this season. I mean, just how is he developing? I was very interested to hear Gareth Southgate's words about him as a leader when he was doing. We'll come on to that World Cup draw in a moment. But I was very interested in Gareth Southgate's words about him because how he developed into a magnificent leader and how every young player was inspired by him, every young player looked up to him, how the Kane had natural captaincy abilities but had developed even more. And it sounded to me like Southgate was actually even a little bit surprised at how Kane had taken on the mantle of England captain. And as you remember, Matt, in the early days of Southgate's tenure as permanent England manager, the captain's armband was shifted around various people. You know, if you had an England shirt on, you had a chance of getting the armband at some stage. And there was a time, I remember, when we used to have those breakaway huddles with Gareth after conferences, and you'd look at him and you'd think, this is a guy who actually might not have a permanent England captain. It took him a long time, if you remember, before he actually
did he?
No, and you got that impression, and because he didn't buy into the cult of the England captain, which we saw in particular personified in two people, in David Beckham and Wayne Rooney. They made the England captaincy an industry, a celebrity industry, for want of a better phrase. And I just think that's everything that was, was the antithesis of what Southgate wanted as an ethos in his team. He didn't want that individual thing, which is why he's reluctant. And it just struck me that we haven't gone back on that. And in the end, he thought, well, I better have one. Going to a World Cup, I better have one. And he's chose Kane, and I think he's been surprised. And I just want to know, as a player and as a leader, but also technically about his game now. I mean, how do you see how he's developed even more this season, Matt?
It's just been remarkable. He used to do a bit of. It's funny because I was looking back at a match report, having written Spurs off after the opening game of the season, when Everton beat them comfortably. I was looking back at my match report, and I made a note there that Kane just was in that particular game was leading the line and looked distanced. And I sort of posed the question: what happened to the Harry Kane that under Pochettino did occasionally used to drop a bit deeper, set a move going, go into the box, finish it off? Well, Mourinho's taken that, to an extra level this season by pulling him further and further back, getting him involved more. His passing, his vision for passes has always been strong, but he's really been able to showcase that. And with Heung-min Son outside him, to be fair, you've got to hit the ball into you've got about 20 yards leeway. He's so quick that as long as you get the ball somewhere in his vague direction, he generally gets there first. As it is, Kane tends to be able to land it on his toe on the run. And Son is one of the most underrated finishers in the game, I think, because every time he runs through on goal, you think that's it. He's got that. But it's the defensive headers he makes, Kane, from set pieces especially, the goal line clearances, and those sorts of things. You know how it is when there's a scramble in the box. Think, oh, who was that? Who was that? Oh, who was it who cleared it off? You're trying to see who's got the shot in. Who was it who blocked it? Oh, it was Harry Kane. What's he doing there? It's there. He's popping up there, and then he's just leading by example with everything he does. He's showing the defenders how to defend. He's showing the midfielders how to play a pass. And at the other end, his finishing is just incredible. And I think, coming back to that Southgate thing, I think it was a very close toss-up between Henderson and Kane ahead of 2018. And I don't think Southgate was that sure. But Kane, having been given the nod, went on, won the Golden Boot, got us to the semi-finals, and hasn't looked back. And it's been the making of him, I think, because I think that's inspired him to believe that he can be the player that he works every ounce of his life to be. And he's a standout player from this generation of Englishmen, definitely.
Neil, I'm not sure who you can add to that eulogy to Harry Kane from Matt there.
Well, I'd say that I think until this season, it has always been regarded, Harry Kane, as a traditional English number 9 gets up there. And I just think that Matt says he's played up now. It's to the stage where you can actually play Harry Kane in a 10 role, dropping off deep behind. You could play him behind Dominic Calvert-Lewin for England, in a 3 behind the 1, just because he's so good in the relationship he has with Son. And mentioned that Southampton game. Him and Mourinho read the game. Kane dropped into midfield or something, and then was spraying balls for Son to go. So you mentioned about players who are coming through this season. I think Son is one name that I would mention, putting him in running for one of the players of the years. And the other one I would say is Edouard Mendy, Chelsea. So we mentioned all the money that has been spent at Chelsea in the attacking place, but I just think he's a top goalkeeper, and he's made a difference. He's present, he's calming presence. He just, it's always like goalkeepers that make the job look simple. And he's calmness, but he just does the important things very well. I think he's made a big difference to Chelsea. I think we'll see that through the season as well.
Yeah, they're the sort of player, Edwin Mendy, the likes of him, the sort of players who might challenge for personal, individual honours towards the end of this season. In the meantime, just a reminder, you can go to mirror.co.uk and vote for your fans' Footballer of the Year for 2020. Just a reminder of that shortlist: De Bruyne, Van Dijk, Henderson, Grealish, Rashford, Mane and Salah. You mentioned Grealish, and he'll be one of those 3 English players there: Grealish, Henderson and Rashford. Yes, Rashford. 3 of the 7 on that shortlist. They're going to be key to Gareth Southgate's plans for Euro 2000 in 2001, the Euro finals next summer, and of course for the World Cup qualifying campaign, which begins next March with a mega game against San Marino at Wembley. Guys, it was the World Cup draw this week. England drawn with some familiar opponents, familiar foes. I would call them foes, but we have a good record against most of them, as it happens. What do you make of the draw, Matt? I always come out with the line every time England get a qualifying group. People refer to the group of death. This is another group of defo, isn't it? We're defo through.
It should be, but I think it underlines the whole problem with the European qualifying is that 4 of our qualifiers are going to be played against 2 of the 6 worst teams in the whole continent. We've got San Marino in there, we've got Andorra, barring 7 seconds and a bad Stuart Pearce back pass, they're foregone conclusions. And that kind of is great, but one of those games is in March, so I don't know what Southgate's going to learn from that game in terms of Euro 2020. At the top end of the draw, though, we do have to be slightly careful about the changing face of European football, because technically we've got the 3rd best second pot team and the 2nd best third pot team, which Hungary in particular, we couldn't have, if 2 are going to get through by the playoffs or automatic qualifications, it's that 3rd pot you've got to watch out for to muddy the waters. And actually, Hungary are right up there amongst the most dangerous teams in there. So we've got to have our wits about it, and we can't take anything for granted. But England have been...
You sound like Gareth.
No, I'm making excuses for him. But Gareth, if I can sound like Gareth as well, he will admit that there's no reason why they shouldn't get through that group very comfortably. And he's not about to say there's no easy games in international football and then go and play Andorra and San Marino 4 times. We should cruise through that. Poland, Lewandowski, all the rest of it. But that's one player, and we're better than that. The only thing is we do really struggle in Poland over the years. There's obviously the famous Tomaszewski incident, but we've only won twice in the last, I think, 8 in 8 competitive games in history in Poland. So we might have to just take a deep breath after a draw over there. Yeah,
we don't tend to lose, do we? We don't tend. We might not have won a few,
and that's job done. Wembley's key again. Win all our home games. We're in the finals.
Yeah, I think there is a slightly broad issue. I think, which I think is for another time. You're right about those smaller teams. People have a go with the Nations League and say, question its validity. Really, it's why is it worthwhile? Well, I'd rather see those type of fixtures than England versus Andorra, England versus Albania, and England versus San Marino. That's with respect to these nations. The fact of the matter is, Gareth said, well, he's aware of the pitfalls of these type of games. Well, really, there aren't any. England have played, I think the stat is England played Albania, Andorra, and San Marino a combination of 14 times, won 14, scored 65, conceded 2. One of which, of course, to be fair, was one of the funniest goals in this international history they've conceded. So I think there's a broader philosophical argument about, do we really need this type of qualifying? But Neil, England, you would think there's one thing they can do, and they have done over recent years, is that they've been absolutely exceptional in qualifying. I should know this, I don't know, but the stats off the top of their head are remarkable in terms of how many qualifiers they've won over the years. I think one of the ones they've lost was a dead rubber. I think that was against Ukraine in whenever it was anyway, 2009 or something like that. But it's England generally make pretty easy work of qualification, don't they, for major tournaments now?
Yeah, they've got it. They know what they're doing. And when you see that draw, my first thought, the biggest stories building up to Qatar 2022 are going to be stories about how the season's going to work and getting ready for Qatar. I think it's going to be hopefully pretty quickly the focus. I think a lot of people forget that this is going to be a World Cup played in November and December, so it's going to be. I think it's going to be a little bit out of kilter, and we still haven't worked out what's going to happen with everything as well. And I mean, the other groups, one of the things I thought interesting, Qatar are actually in Group A,
yes,
playing friendly with the Republic of Ireland and Portugal and Serbia. That's I think that's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on what that does. But I think, the only possible advantage, as you say, that playing these smaller countries, you do get to experiment and you do get to play, to look forward a little bit. You give Jack Grealish 90 minutes and tell him to run the show again, and that's another experience of international football for him. To hope he's in good stead. I mean, I do agree that it's the same sort of theory of the way the Champions League is trying to be involved, that they want to see more big games in the big clubs, and that's sort of the same idea of the UEFA League of Nations. That's what people want to see. That people, the friendlies and even England and Andorra are going to be hard sells for people with everything else going on in the world. So that's what we're trying to get. And so so looking forward to November 21st, 2022, the first World Cup game.
Yes, and actually Gareth Southgate did talk about how he'd been there that time of year for the Club World Cup. And he's got no fears about climate or about conditions. So it will be interesting to see how it works out around the Premier League's fixture schedule for the 22-23 season, and see how that pans out. You did mention the other home nations there. Well, you mentioned Republic of Ireland having to play Qatar in friendlies in their group. Without going into their specific the details of their groups, I just wondered where you see the home nations standing. I mean, obviously Wales have, the number one seeds in their group are Belgium. Clearly, that's going to be, tough. Republic of Ireland's number one teams, I think, are Portugal and Northern Ireland in the same group as Italy. But I just wondered, Matt, where you see at the moment the progress and the development of the other home nations, including Scotland, of course, as well.
Well, Scotland are building up their resilience, first of all, which was the first thing that they needed to do. And they are, my first World Cup was 82, when Scotland had some of the best British players in their team. They had an overabundance of talented players at that World Cup. And slowly and surely they're getting individuals. Unfortunately, they're all left backs. But there are a few better players now coming through to bring the rest along, a bit better organisation. So that's progress in the right way. Wales have had a glory spell driven by Gareth Bale. People wondered, there was a kind of a lap over between Ryan Giggs and Gareth Bale, and it's not going to come much better than that for them in terms of individuals. And their worry is, now that Bale is getting older, doesn't seem to be able to be putting up any trees at Spurs anymore. You wonder how long he'll have that impact on an international level, and who's coming up to sort of support him and take them on and keep that momentum going. And Northern Ireland have always had the problem that anything virtually is an overachievement, and we mustn't forget just how small a country it is and how few footballers they have to choose from. When they've got internationals like David Healy, who, but in terms of his club career, had a very ordinary career in England, and he's breaking records on international levels. They rely on those individuals and overachieving, and it's kind of an optimistic bubble to get whatever results they can. But for them to be as high in the pot they're in at the moment, it is quite a strong achievement. And for them to be reaching championship finals is incredible. So if they can do that again, that's winning the World Cup for them, and good luck to them.
Yeah, I think all the home nations are I don't know. I'm quite optimistic, about the chance of all the home nations. I mean, not necessarily qualifying. Listen, they're all not going to qualify, but I do think they are all showing signs of development. England in particular, obviously, have an extremely...
Andy, what I would just say is people may not have realised this year the playoffs are semi-finals, so that's the most likely route for the other home nations to get to the championships. But the second place teams go into a semi-final, go into a 4-team with only one qualifying. So the playoff route's a very hard route to get to the finals. Yes. So it does make it harder for those second teams.
Yeah. But I mean, anyway, let's hopefully they will we'll have more than one home nation making it to Qatar 2022 when those finals do take place. In the same way as the Euros next year, there will be. We've all been to these tournaments, and they're not just about the football, more so than ever. And I don't think Qatar 22 will be just about the football. We know that. Gareth Southgate has already fielded questions about human rights issues, about other things surrounding that tournament. And such is the nature of big football tournaments in the modern age. They inevitably bring up more discussion, quite rightly so, and spotlight on things. And of course, one of the things in particular that the spotlight is on is racial equality. And this week, that'll be the same at the Euros, the same at World Cup 2022. This should be a flagship issue for UEFA and for FIFA. And it certainly is for UEFA right now, because, we've had as far as I can see, an unprecedented situation on Tuesday of the Paris Saint-Germain and the Istanbul players walking off the pitch after the alleged racially abusive remark from the fourth official. Neil, what did you make of that whole scenario? And is it, a step in the right direction when you have this direct, unified action from the players when they feel that there's something wrong has been done like that?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that the last week we've had two big incidents with the Millwall, which we were going to speak again, and the Paris Saint-Germain and the Istanbul strike act, effectively. What struck me was in the context of watching the Anton Ferdinand documentary on BBC last week. So I'm not sure if people haven't had the chance to watch it. It's a great watch. It's on the iPlayer now, and it's really eye-opening. And the biggest thing that struck me about that was Anton Ferdinand felt let down by the system. That he felt wronged, and he had gone to the authorities to try and act on this, and he felt his complaints and his feelings weren't addressed properly, and 9 years later he felt let down. Now, what the situation we've got now is, we think, I was going to use the phrase current generation of players, but 9 years ago, it seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't. Players now are not prepared to accept it. So we've had examples, Kevin Prince Boateng walking off in Italy. Until now, they've been quite limited examples. We've seen, led by Demba Ba and the Istanbul players, and then supported by Mbappe and Neymar, the other players, they've seen what they judged to be wrong, and they said, we're not having it. This is not going to happen. And they've taken the action themselves and forced UEFA into taking the action, suspending the game, removing the fourth official, replaying the game with a new set of officials. And I think that is quite a significant step, in the sense that players have said, my view of it is that players are feeling the job the football authorities have been doing on this issue hasn't been good enough. We talking back to that Ferdinand issue, that they are saying this is the way it should be. We want it. This is the way we want it to be handled, and it's now up to the football authorities and UEFA in this case, and then the FIFA and the other matches as well, to match the feeling of the players. And I would say, generally the feeling of the football watching public to address this issue.
Yeah. Matt, Neil mentioned there the taking of the knee, which we all got. I wouldn't say, we all became accustomed to when we were covering games behind closed doors, and in a way, like Les Ferdinand, who sort of said in the end, it became something that he thought had maybe outgrown its purpose. But in a way, its purpose is now being re-emphasised by what happened at Millwall last Saturday.
Yeah, I think it has actually. I think people are talking about it. again, for the right reasons. People have tried to hijack it and turn the Black Lives Matter movement into something that it was never intended to be, certainly not by any of the players taking a knee. But it's been given us an opportunity to refocus what it is all about, why people are doing it, why people are still doing it, and why it carries on. Whether or not the fact that, right, we've said what we've said now, we've had a chance to say it again, let's show our support in a different way. There's an argument to be said for that, because like you say, when players continue to take the knee, you begin to become sort of immune to it, and it doesn't have the meaning that it did those first few times. And it's important that meaning is not lost and is constantly hammered home. And if it takes change to do that, then let's do that. But I think without that backdrop of the global support for that, I don't think what happened in Paris would have happened. I think as well, England have got to, feel proud as a nation because of what happened in Sofia. I think that again set a stepping stone towards what could happen. And then ultimately, the two of the world's finest footballers, I think Neymar and Mbappe, were leaders in. It's easy to walk off as a team, but when you get the solidarity, and that's what this is all about, it's standing arm in arm together. When that happens, then I think that's when the message is most powerful. What I would say, though, is I think we now need, for the fourth official concerned, and I know John Barnes tweeted on this, I think we've got to allow UEFA to make a full investigation, because in the middle of this is an individual who may or may not have made a racial comment that he realised. The fact is somebody felt they were being racially abused and everyone supported him, and that's important. But whether or not the intent was there, that there's an individual right at the heart of that may be having a very difficult time because of something that was completely inadvertent and accidental. So I do think it's important to finish the whole process and show that this isn't just emotion and whatever. We want justice to be done for everybody, and so I think that process has to be allowed to happen and then carry forward from there.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Matt. I think that process has to be as transparent, for an issue that is so crucial, for an issue that is so potentially damaging to everyone. Really, I think that has to be transparent. And I think you're also right in what you say about the players unifying. They believe, whether they're right or not, they believe that was an incident of racial discrimination, and they walked off as a unified unit. And that I think sets it's an important staging post. So when that happens next time, if it's from someone from the crowd, for example, or an opposition player, then they do it all together. It's like that game you mentioned in Sofia. They were very torn then, I think, at the time. England had both teams just walked off, then UEFA wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. I think you're right. I think that's important. And again, going back to my original point, I do think that what happened in Millwall has re-emphasised the significance of taking the knee before the game. And if players, I just think it should be the freedom of the players. They feel that they want to do that and show their support for whatever particular fight they want against inequality, then they should be allowed to do it. Of course, this only came about because fans are now allowed back into the stadiums. I just want to go into that for a moment about, I don't know whether you guys have been to games with fans as yet. Have you guys covered a game with fans, Neil?
Yeah, I got a couple to the Southampton Brighton game on Monday night. I think the biggest thing you notice is when the players first run out, the noise generated from both nights is terrific. And then the fans have got to get used to saying, not seeing the VAR. Appreciate they know more what's going on. They're watching on TV at home, of course. That's a reminder when you are back in the stadium. But I think in Brentford last night, I was there for Derby. And it's a small step, but I do think that the noise generated by even the relatively small amount, 2,000, it does make a difference. It's a welcome difference. It's a small step, but it's a good step. Yeah.
What I'm interested in, Matt, is that I read some quotes from a Wolves player. Now I can't. The name has slipped my mind. I don't know. But anyway, there's a Wolves player who said after that game when they were soundly beaten at Anfield, with the first game, the Liverpool welcomed 2,000 fans back, and he said he was clearly taken aback by how much influence those 2,000 fans believe they could exert. You know, and you saw the pictures of Klopp, as usual, sort of stuff in front of the Kop, and the Wolves, I think, player was clearly implying that you know they had these 2,000 fans a big impact, and that a few days earlier when it was I think Steve Bruce and who else who complained that, well, not didn't complain but hinted that it's perhaps a little bit unfair. I think it was Bielsa, wasn't it? Bielsa, who complained it might have been unfair that some teams would have 2,000 fans back in, and obviously those in Tier 3 would have no fans back in. I remember at the time I wrote about it, sort of basically much laughing this out of court, like, you know, and saying, well, if 2,000 fans are going to intimidate you, you know, I mean, you shouldn't be in the league, etc. However, when I read these quotes from the Wolves player, I thought to myself, you know what, you know, maybe these managers have a point. Is it fair that some teams can have 2,000 fans cheering them on, and other teams can't?
No, but we're back to classic Jose again. Point was put to him, and we've got a walkout from Neil's cat there.
Fair enough.
Feeding time for the cat.
Yes.
Jose was fine. He was asked about that, and basically his response was, yeah, perhaps it's unfair, but get a grip. Think about the circumstances we're in. Who are we doing it for? We want fans to be watching football. Yeah, it's probably not fair that Chelsea can spend £250 million in the summer and Leeds can't. You know, there's lots of injustices in football, and the fact that again, Jose did it far better and far more poisonously, but basically said, come on, there's bigger problems in the world at the moment.
He's great when he's winning, isn't he, man?
Oh, absolutely. No,
he's brilliant when he's winning. Yeah. I mean, this is the guy that if he's losing is railing against every single injustice in the book.
That's what makes it funnier, though.
He'd have a go at ball boys. He'd have a go at anyone.
Yeah.
With ball boys, he will have a go at anyone if he's not. And now he's like suddenly Mr. sort of altruism, isn't he? Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
There's bigger things going on in the world than me. I mean, not much me, but exactly.
Yeah.
But Neil, I just wonder what your view. It does,
It does. No, it does lift the fans. It was brought home, and I think this is perhaps something they need to look at if it's going to go on for the season. Is in an individual match, there was the classic chant. I don't know if it's happened elsewhere. I'm sure it has, because fans are fans everywhere. But it was the Spurs fans in the game against who did they play against? Gosh, my mind's
Spurs of the weekend, Arsenal.
Arsenal, of course, North London derby, yeah. Singing to the Arsenal fans, your support is. Yeah, and obviously they haven't got any tickets, and perhaps that's something that needs to be looked at.
Getting away fans in
away fans some way. It's complicated enough as it is, but as we get used to the processes, perhaps have some segregated, socially distanced away fans. That's just one thing. But I suddenly realised the noise that I've been missing that isn't on any of these FIFA tracks and whatever that they use, and it was when Xhaka played a pass. Saka completely misread it and he went out of touch, and it was that old way, that ironic cheer. It's not on any of the soundtracks that you hear off the telly when they create the sound effects, but that ironic cheer. And I thought that's the noise that's been missing from football. All this, basically taking the P out of the away team for a massive blunder. But undoubtedly, it just feels a different game again.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was at the London Stadium. It was my experience of the fans going back, and you think, well, 2,000 fans inside the London Stadium. You think, is that really going to make a difference? 50,000, 60,000 doesn't make that much of a difference normally. Will 2,000 make a difference, in that cavernous dome? And it did. I mean, it really did. Trevor Brooking came onto the pitch before the game and sort of, spoke in front of the fans, and it made a big difference. I mean, to be fair, it didn't make a huge amount of difference to the outcome of the game. But Neil, it would be good, wouldn't it, if more fans, Gareth Southgate again said, listen, he hopes that come March, more fans will be allowed in, and Wembley might be partly occupied by fans for those World Cup qualifiers. I mean, what I would say is that I'm reading news stories saying London might go back into Tier 3. So I guess we can't get ahead of ourselves, can we, in welcoming, big crowds back to football games.
Correct. I think we're looking at issues here that beyond football, that how's this going to be done? I mean, once the vaccine gets rolled out, are we going to say you need to have get your vaccine certificate to be able to buy tickets in a stadium, go to concerts, or get on flights, and all these things? I think there are all these huge issues that have to be addressed. And I just think, as you mentioned about London, the rates are going up in a lot of the boroughs. So by the next couple of months, that could end next week. Potentially on the 16th, London could go into tier 3, and that would be no more. We're talking about the next month or two. So I think we just appreciate that we've got it at the moment, and I do feel desperately sorry for the fans that are watching it in tier 3 for absolutely out of anyone's control the way things are. Unfortunately, that's just the situation that we're in, and I just think there will be a lot of serious discussions, and I'm very interested to hear what fan groups and clubs think about, basically telling people, if you haven't got a vaccine, you can't come into the stadium from at the end of this season or next season as well. I think this is going to be a sort of a culture war, a discussion that's going to be go through that throughout the whole of society, and football is just going to be effectively a small part of that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we all agree that we all said it, and everyone in football said it, how football was nothing without fans. And we all said during it how much we miss fans, but we probably didn't know how much until these last few days when we've all been to games when even having just 2,000 fans in there has seemed, just brilliant. And bear in mind, local clubs as well. Think how it feels there. The club just down the road from me here is Crewe Alexandra, and they'll have 2,000 fans in this weekend, and their average crowd might be only 4,000 or 5,000. So you're sort of half full. And imagine the lift that'll give to them. So let's hope, touch wood, that we do keep making progress and get more fans back in. Guys, I want to finish on sad news, but also just on a look back and a happy note. We said farewell to a world great recently in Diego Maradona, and sadly another figure from that sort of era. I think he was a bit older than Diego, 4 years older, I think, passed away overnight, and that was Paolo Rossi. And you know what? It just got me thinking. I was at an age then where my interest in football really was at its absolute, had taken off through the roof. I was playing a lot, watching a lot, and Paolo Rossi involved. I just wanted in one of the greatest games that I remember, Italy 3, Brazil 2, in the World Cup of '82. I just would like to know, guys, what your memories are. I mean, not necessarily of him, but of that era, because I keep reading everywhere how much the game has got better and faster and more skillful. And, we're holding these great club sides up now as having moved there on a step or two. But I'm looking at those games from that era of '82, typified by Italy 3, Brazil 2 in that, I think it was the second group stage of in Barcelona, wasn't it, I think. And I'm thinking, you know what? Games don't get much better than that. I mean, I don't know what your guys' memories of those times are, or how you think the game has progressed or not progressed.
Well,
Matt?
I'm an absolute mere ankle biter compared to yourself.
Yes,
Andy.
you are. To be fair.
So,
yes.
So I was 9 for that, but that was my
Yes.
World Cup in terms of the first one when I knew what a World Cup was. When I'd rush home from school and watch it, and the memories still burn as brightly of that World Cup as they do any of the ones since. I swallowed it all up. It was and that game, I think that was an afternoon game, wasn't it? So I was allowed to. I didn't have to go to bed and miss the end of that one. I still remember my dad sending me home with France cruising their way to the World Cup final in the semis, and said, "Well, go on, this game's over. We'll leave it there, son." Who's off to bed and missing the 3-3 and the penalties. But that '82. That Brazil-Italy game. What I would say, when you play back, it's played at a very Brazilian pace.
It was hot
compared to the modern game. It was hot, but even now
it was Barcelona in the middle of summer, mate.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But you see warm games played by Premier League teams and modern teams, and the athleticism, it has to be said, is a whole quantum leap beyond that now. But some of the skills and the vision and some of the things they were trying to do with the ball. It's a joy to watch, and just the exuberance of the play that was there. It wasn't all about tracking back and whatever. Yes. It was about showing some remarkable individual skills, hitting some ludicrously long range shots with curl and dip and everything else that actually ended up being world-beating shots throughout that World Cup, and that game probably exemplified it all with the excitement. And I remember, definitely, we were all Paolo Rossi in the playground for a week or so, because none of us had heard of him because we didn't watch international football before that. But for sort of 4 weeks, he was the man.
Neil?
Yeah, I think it's also in the context of losing Maradona last week. That what he was able to perform, to show that football didn't start in 1992. And for me, that Italy-Brazil game is one of my favourite games of all time. I remember watching just the contrast of style. That Brazil team, often regarded as the best team to never win the World Cup, absolutely superb, flowing samba football. But there's more than one way to win a football match, and Italy set up this very pragmatic style and had a red hot striker, and the contrast of the styles and the way it was done, for me, that's one of the many great appeals of football. And just the reaction in Italy this morning, just looking through social media and the paper, a real hero have died. It's Italy won it again in 2006, but that '82 team had a special resonance with the country after what the country had been through every time. And so, I just for me, the '82 World Cup is England scoring after in their first game against France after a few seconds. It's a real happy memories for me, because that time, and then as we were recalling about '86 and everything and what Maradona did then, I just think World Cups are special when you look back when you look back on where you were in your life, which games you remember, where you were watching them with the real sort of mark posts in your life. And I think and I really enjoy. So don't think about those games. When you think about it, it just brings back really nice memories, and for all the World Cups.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And Matt, even if you're an ankle biter like your good self, mate, you can still go back and look at recordings of that World Cup and that game. The Rossi hat trick and the goals from Socrates and Falcao. I mean, it was just a very special game, a very special tournament, and Rossi was clearly a very special striker. And it's just good to look back to that era and not be always obsessed with what's happening in the very, very modern game. But we are gladly, and we will be again next week. If you could join us then. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. You can catch it up from your normal, whatever you get your podcast. Matt, Neil, thank you very much. And we'll speak next week. Have a nice weekend, everyone.